The April 23rd Cumberland County Commissioners Workshop meeting. Please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order and we'll open up the floor to public comment. Hearing none, seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to item 2. With the arrival of Mr. Martin, we have a press release and proclamation. Commissioner proclaimed May 2015 as Mental Health Awareness Month. Commissioner Eichelberger, Robin Tolan, and Joe Martin. Come on up.
No, next Friday. Next Friday. The first. Not tomorrow. It's the first. It's the first.
We're looking for you. So, thank you all for being here and participating in this. As Larry explained, we do have a proclamation here acknowledging Mental Health Awareness Month. We do this every year. It's a very important part of what county government does in the human services area, is providing for various mental health needs, including intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And our role in this, through this proclamation, is to do what we can to ensure that there's community awareness of not only the incidence of mental health issues, but the pervasive impact on our community. But more importantly, the fact that our friends, our neighbors, our family members who are dealing with mental health issues are all part of our community here. And they're visible, and we're going to be very visible with our mental health walk that we have, and that is on the 1st, right? Okay, Friday. And that takes place here in Carlisle each year. And we'll walk, and it begins at Latour Park in Carlisle at 10 a.m. We end up here at the courthouse. We have a little rally just to thank everybody for being there and to make our case for the acknowledgement and recognition of the role that mental health consumers play in our community. We have a proclamation. I'd like to present it to you, Robin. We're going to do a photo here. We ask our friends in the media if they would please try to pick this up. So public information is a very important part of this, raising awareness on this. I'm not going to read this entire thing, but there's a couple of things in the news release that I think are really worth pointing out. It mentions, we're doing this also in conjunction with Perry County. We are a joint program for mental health with Perry County. So we're both counties are issuing proclamations in recognition of this. Since 1949, May has been recognized as Mental Health Awareness Month. Over 25% of Americans over the age of 18 experience mental health challenges each year. One major factor regarding accessing help is that of stigma. Whether a challenge be physical or psychiatric, early treatment and support has proven to be effective in reducing the impact of illness. Stigma should not be a barrier to accessing supports and needs and services. A lot of folks are frankly just afraid to acknowledge it, afraid of the characterizations that come with that. So hopefully we can create greater awareness and get us past the situation so that hesitation to seek the assistance, the supports that are needed, doesn't become an obstacle for our community members. One of the things that's mentioned in here, I'll make this the last thing I talk about, many individuals living with mental health challenges live, work, and contribute to their communities. They are our friends, our family, our neighbors, they are us. That's the important part of this entire recognition. That's why we're going to do the march. The idea is we are here, we are part of the community, and times are very different. We're not going to be invisible. People shouldn't ask people to be invisible because they're dealing with physical or mental challenges. It is part of life. It's part of all of us, part of all of our communities. So I'm very happy to present this to Robin on behalf of the commissioners as an acknowledgement. And I think we're going to, did you want to add anything, Robin?
The only other thing I would say from that,
I work in the mental health office here in the county. And while yes, individuals with mental illness are present in our communities, they're present in our families, they may be one of us indeed. Recovery is very possible for those individuals. The theme of our walk is celebrate your victories. And I think that's really important to consider that mental illness and the stigma that goes along with that is no longer the curse that it used to be, like this is the best you're ever going to get and you'll go no further. Recovery is indeed possible for folks. Folks do work, they are part of our communities. Joe is a living example of that as well, who is a very integral part of our communities in many ways. And recovery is possible for folks, so celebrating your victories is really our focus and the important part of being able to help do away with mental health stigma. Did you want to say?
Just look forward to growing our walk every year. This year we're expecting over 200 people for this year's walk. There were about 3-4 years ago we were around 117. So in just the last couple years we've all but doubled, and it's through getting people from the community as a whole to come out that we're able to continue to grow and get that message that it is possible to go from where I would have been 9 years ago when we had our first walk to where I am now. It is possible to go that journey if the services and supports that we need are there.
One question, are we getting t-shirts this year?
Yes.
Yes, we're not here yet.
They should be able to be picked up today or the beginning of next week. So you will be and we'll probably be giving them to you to give to your coworkers.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Yeah, even if you didn't sign up for the walk, you're welcome to come. You might not get a t-shirt because we might not have enough, but you're welcome to come. We really want folks to participate.
You ready? Okay. Give me a big smile. And let me take one more. Smile again. Perfect. Good.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Yep.
For Commissioners proclaimed April 19th, 2015 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week.
Michelle, come on up. On behalf of the Board of Commissioners, I do have a proclamation for the week of April the 19th to the 25th as National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Rally tonight. Yep. And this acknowledges and reaffirms the commitment that we have in the county through your office, criminal justice system, certainly community providers and leaders to acknowledge this very, very important week. I'm going to turn this over to you. And I'll tell you, Michelle has brought to us compelling stories, individuals, not just numbers, not just data, but and I've stood in the hallway when the elevator doors have opened, and someone was saying, you know, can I help you? And they're looking for your office tucked away back here, and seeing their expression coming off that elevator, and then seeing the support, the care, the compassion that you provide on the way out. I've encountered them leaving your office. I can tell you and convey the sincere work that you do and your staff for this very, very important issue. So I'm going to present this and hope that you have a few more words to say.
Thank you. As Commissioner Cross said, our rally is tonight, 6 o'clock at the old courthouse. We do have t-shirts, we have totes, we have extras, so if you haven't registered for a t-shirt, come on out. It'll be bright yellow and blue. We're bringing attention to not only crime victims, but we're also bringing attention to supporters. As Commissioner Cross said, this group of commissioners, since I've been with the Victim Services and the DA's office, they've been great support to our office, things that we ask for. I even see a smile on Commissioner Eichelberger's face when I leave. I was like, oh, I did a good job. It's great to have the support, and as we presented at the salary board, Commissioner Hirschler and Commissioner Cross, you could tell they were engaged. They're engaged in the real life stories, the pain that our victims feel, and even the pain their supporters feel, because sometimes it's frustrating, there's only so much we can do. So we're going to rally tonight, we're going to honor victims and survivors, we're going to recognize those supporters, and then we're going to walk with our bright yellow shirts, hoping to engage the community and get the word out and ask the community to help empower victims, empower them in their healing, empower them to report. And it's funny how Robin said earlier, it's very similar. There's a stigma that goes along with being a crime victim, and that it doesn't even make sense to me. It shouldn't be that way. And these crime victims, we want to help them become survivors and give back to the community. And it sounds like Robin and her group wants the same thing. So we do ask, if you can't come out tonight, I know you know of victims in your community. Reach out to them, even if it's just to lend an ear. You know, just listen to them.
Looks good. Give me a smile. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Moving on then to item number 5, we'll call on Tammy Bender, discussion of resolution 2015-9 regarding budget adjustments.
Criminal justice planning and IP programs is increasing revenue and expenses by $12,256 for additional funding from PCCD IP funding. This funding will be used to purchase drug testing supplies and electronic monitoring maintenance costs. There's no impact to the general fund.
Any questions or comments for Tammy? Thank you, Tammy. I'd like to move on to item number 6, call on our long-standing human resources director, Elizabeth A.K. Liz Booth, to talk about the capacity agreement regarding nursing home.
It is long-standing around
Good morning. We're asking for approval to ratify the tentative agreement between the nursing home and the county with AFSCME for the re of their own wages.
Questions, comments for Liz?
Thank you for your work on this.
Good. Thank you, Liz. Moving on into item number 7, we'll turn it over to Sandy Moyle for contracts and agreements.
Thank you, Lori. Lori.
I'm pretty confident I'm answering Linda. Sandy could be a guy's name too.
I know. I can see
Take it away,
it.
Sandy.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin with the assessment office and call on Robin Weigel to discuss the agreement between assessment and government software services, Inc. Robin?
Good morning. This is our renewal agreement contract for our real estate billing software, the tax administration software, capital software, tax claim. It's a combination of modules to allow us to flow processes, work, to be able to keep this, software running. The vendor does do upgrades when we feel there are things that need to be added or tweaked. Just want to be able to review that.
What's the cost of the contract?
There is no increase in the contract. They maintained the same price.
And it's a one-year contract?
I think it's up to 3. I think it's yearly, but for a 3-year period. I think we set a maximum at $127,800. It's like $35.50 a month, but it covers all the modules. The real estate billing module changes in our CAMA data system are put into that so that we can create billing and our monthly billing. The tax admin is where we actually get data from the tax collector and we can upload and we know every single day who's paid, who's not paid. We can, monitor, revenue coming in, how much is outstanding, that kind of thing. The tax collector, we offer the software to the tax collector so they can be using, that system. Makes it really easy to transfer data. We've been doing it for, I think, since 2000. Quite a while now. 2012.
So it's at least
Or
been 3
sorry,
years
2009. We started in 2009.
with this particular software.
Yeah, it was a basic, and then they came in and tweaked it as we needed it to fit our needs.
And Robin, are you sure the price, are you sure the cost?
Yes.
That's the number?
Yes,
Can you repeat
it-
that, please?
It has not gone up. They
Yeah.
maintained,
And that number is?
it's $35.50 a month, and it's broken down by each module: tax claim, tax admin, tax collector, real estate, and then the integration part between CAMA and the software.
All right, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Rob? Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Moving on, I'd like to call on Lisa Ryder to discuss the agreement between Children and Youth and Vision Quest National Limited. Lisa?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here to ask for your approval with Vision Quest. This is a new service that our Juvenile Probation Office has requested. They specifically are a group home for girls, which they have a need for. Their per diem is comparable with other group homes that we contract with.
Are there any questions for Lisa?
Thank you.
Lisa. Next, I'd like to call on Lynette to discuss the submission of grant application to Department of Human Services Long-Term Living, 2 agreements, and a capital project request for CNRC. Lynette?
Yes, I've combined the first and the last. Claremont is responsible if a device is deemed medically necessary to provide the item for the cost of care for that. That's where the capital request comes in. We need to purchase a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair that's $16,670, and that is where the capital request comes in. We are also able to apply to the Department of Human Services for a DME grant that should reimburse us for 100% of that wheelchair through those monies and for that specific resident. So we are asking permission for the submission of the grant as well as the approval of the capital request. As far as the first contract, it would be with Lamar for the digital billboards. We're requesting for the remainder of 2015, there would be 3 months that would be having those 3 billboards each in service. The total remaining contract for the remainder of the year would be $13,500, which is for the 9 billboards over the course, 3 each of the 3 months. It's $1,500 a billboard 3 times for a total additional annual of $13,500. The fourth one is House Calls RX. That would be a no expense contract for both nurse practitioners and physician assistants to be able to provide care for our residents in the facility. It is no cost, but it would be providing the care for the remainder of the year and for a year's worth of service. And this would be to help supplement the other physicians that are currently there, and there are some turnover in those positions, and so this is of high priority to get these other physician assistants in. Any questions?
Yeah. Lynette, how is it, explain how this is no cost?
They bill the physicians, and they have to bill the insurances of the residents, and that is not a cost of our care. So that's,
We serve as a referral?
they come into our facility.
and they're providing the care in our facility, and they're billing the residents' insurances, whether it be Medicare, whether it be medical assistance, but that's not a,
They carry their own liability insurance?
that's correct. That's correct, and that's all through house calls. That's correct. Any other questions?
Yeah, well, just to, so the Lamar and the house calls RX or whatever, that's not a capital project fund?
No.
Okay, it's just listed under the,
What's that?
I just wanted to be clear on that.
The capital project at the bottom, that is the DME
is the
wheelchair. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Nanette. Moving on to the ERP department, I'd like to call on Beth Tornak to discuss the agreement between ERP and addendum for Employee US Inc. Beth?
Good morning. I'm requesting approval for an addendum to the M4, which is Lawson contract, to transfer licenses for the Lawson Business Intelligence software to the M4 Business Intelligence software. This is transferring them from version 9 to version 10 to go along with our upgrade. This is a no-cost addendum, will not incur any cost whatsoever.
Any questions for Beth? Thank you, Beth. Next, I'd like to call on Mark Adams to discuss agreements between IMTO and Communitech Services Inc. and Microsoft Software Asset Management Consent Letter. Mark?
Good morning, Commissioners. I apologize for my voice this morning. The Communitech contract is our voicemail system. They cost, it's an annual maintenance and support cost, increase of $400 this year, total of $5,400. And the second contract is with Microsoft Software. They are looking to come in and do an assessment of our licenses. It's not really an audit, but it's an assessment. There's no charge to that. They just need some documentation.
Any questions for Mark? Thanks, Mark. Next, I'd like to call on Kirk Center to discuss the construction project permit from the National Park Service. Kirk?
Commissioners, as you're aware, we're starting a construction project on Bernheisel Bridge later this summer, be a superstructure replacement. Just when I thought we had an easy bridge project.
Do we haven't?
Nope.
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 Nope,
So
just with that.
all the surrounding land is owned by the National Park Service, and the bridge carries the Appalachian Trail. So we have to work with the National Park Service to get a permit. Took us a little while, but we do have the permit. Really stipulates what we have to do with it, work within the right of way, and probably the most important stipulation is that we maintain access for hikers
Yeah.
for the duration of our construction.
And that's gonna be 18 months?
No, actually, it's only gonna be about 3. So
Three?
we're looking
Oh,
at
that's-
July, August timeframe,
Okay.
getting started with that.
So,
Thank you, Kirk. I'd like to move on to Bob Shively to discuss the submission of the Radiation Emergency Response Fund grant application to FEMA and a contract between public safety and FEMA. Bob?
2 items for review and approval on Monday. The first is the fiscal year 2015-2016 Radiation Emergency Response Fund grant submission to FEMA, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. This is our yearly grant to support our TMI preparedness, and that includes our EOC, as well as Cumberland and Lower Allen's EOC, and the Red Cross support that we received for that preparedness and planning. The grant amount is $26,296, and that's no match. Second one is renewal of the lease for King Automotive. This is the storage garage, climate control for our hazardous materials response equipment, several vehicles in Lemoyne. And that is a 3-year contract at $15,000 per year. That's no change from the previous, I believe it was a 5-year contract before, either 3 or 5, so that's no change over several years. And we did check with John Lobb, and that's a competitive rate for the area and the space allocation we have. So, questions? And the third item I'm going to pass to Megan.
This is not a contract, but we were asked to just come up and give you an update. We got some pretty interesting numbers last week through Public Safety Social Media Program, and I just wanted to highlight them for you. Last week, we were able to reach 49,000 people through social media, through Facebook alone, actually. We only have about 8,000 likes, and I actually brought with me this week's numbers, and the week isn't even complete. This week, we've reached 61,599 people. Now, we can look at the geographic location of those people. We can weed out a few thousand, but a few thousand when you're talking 50 isn't that bad. And again, we just wanted to highlight them for you. We have about 8,000 likes, but we're reaching way more than that, and that tells us through shares, and that tells us that we're putting out good content. We're seeing an increased activity. People are turning to us on those pages when we have these storms, when there are those missing people, when something's going on in the community, and that's what we want to see. That's what some of the activity was last week, weather statements, we had a missing person, and this week with the tornado activity and everything like that, people are turning to us. This is a positive across the board. It's a new, not a new way, but it's another way for us to get to the community. It's become so important that we've actually put another person as a PIO support person doing just social media in the EOC when we have an activation. And the other great impact that it has is it's helping to reduce the number of unnecessary calls to the 911 center when something's going on. We're able to push that information out to folks so they aren't calling in. We're able to put out the utility outage information so folks aren't calling us to report their outages. It's a great way for us to communicate to the media, and it's reducing their need to have to call in the 911 center for information because they're getting it from these social media sites. So, and we're also assisting our partner agencies by sharing their content. We can increase their impressions out there in the public as well when they're looking for different wanted criminals and things like that. And the last thing that I brought with me too that we hadn't included that Larry hadn't seen, I just ran some numbers before I come up here for Twitter. This past month we reached 46,000 impressions, so around 46,000 people. They don't break the data down quite that much that I can tell what in there is really good meaty Cumberland County folks, but we're seeing over the last 6 months through Twitter on average, we're reaching about 36,000 impressions a month. So we're making an impact. So that's it, unless anyone has questions. Yes.
So I have a question. Monday night, I was at the Capital Region Council of Governments meeting, and with about 30 local government officials from throughout the Capital Region, York, Dauphin, Cumberland, Perry counties. And, all of our phones all activated, to, essentially set the warning, emergency alert, take cover immediately. So we all proceeded down the steps of the Hampton Township building to the basement. We were down there. I was able to get in touch with Bob, and he pretty much gave me an idea as to what was going on. The two storms were en route and going to be colliding and all that. But is there anything that actually will send something out later that says things are clear?
We will typically, the Weather Service does a very good job of putting a timeline on those warnings and watches, and we typically abide by that. We never ourselves want to necessarily take on that liability of saying it's all clear. So we share the Weather Service's information, they put that information out, and they're normally pretty accurate with their watches and warnings as far as time frames.
Yeah, Michelle sent out then, sort of.
Yes, and
because I was in Harrisburg at dinner.
Yeah.
And the whole room, of course, whatever. I mean, Dave Marchescu was there with, sort of like an Instagram.
Yeah.
But, same kind of thing, but I did get Michelle's then sort of, the warning delivered. So.
We try to, again, abide by those, and then through social media and other avenues, we will try to put information out there if we're seeing a lot of activity. But amazingly enough, we did not see a lot of storm-related activity that night, knock on wood. Still early in the year.
Coming down 81, trust me.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Cloud to cloud lightning.
I had the wall cloud in Shippensburg that I was looking at, going, that's not right,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
No, we were apparently very fortunate, but I'll have to check to see where I got Michelle's information.
Yeah, it came through.
And I think the key piece of that is we want to get the warning out to make sure people
Yeah,
can be aware.
Right.
And then from there, if, there's, whether it's local news media, I know they were all breaking in, doing the coverage of the actual radar, if you can, like phone apps for radar to see where the actual location of the storm is, and kind of track it from there.
Well, especially at night. That sort of terror of the wind.
Not really being able to see.
Not being able to see the cloud formations and driving into something that.
Right.
Well, that's why we like to encourage folks to, get those apps.
Get off the road.
Well, get off the road, but also the classic NOAA weather radio that's going to alarm in the middle of the night to let you know something's going on. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie.
It is.
And the tricky part of that too is it's a county-wide alert. So, when the formation, they have the circular clouds in Shippensburg or Newburgh, you're going to get the same message for the whole county. And, you still have a half hour, maybe an hour till, and it depends on which way it tracks. It can get to Carlisle, fall apart, it can, go over the mountain into Perry County, that type of thing. So it's tricky business.
Well, anyway, So
But you do it well.
there was no cell reception down in the basement down.
Yeah, the second call.
I had to venture up and check things out to see whether everything was all right.
That's the whole purpose of each down here.
Yeah. But I mean, we did get the warning to go there. Anyway.
Well, if you wouldn't have been here today, we'd have checked.
So hang it out.
I just want to commend our public safety department. Last week, we also heard the sheriff's department did great success using Facebook to collect outstanding cost fees and restitutions and post warrants. So I think Cumberland County is getting pretty hip to social media. It's producing good outcomes. So everybody's to be commended, and again, under the leadership of our communications department, I want to see this experiment grow. Thank you.
That's all I have,
You done, Sandy?
Yes, Larry.
Thank you, Sandy. Item number 8, call on Charles Carruthers, discussion of the capital project request from DRO for security camera upgrade.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. What we're intending on doing with this project is basically upgrading our old black and white camera systems that we have. We have some cameras we want to replace with high definition color cameras. Basically, this project is just a replacement of what we currently have. The cost is going to be taken over by incentive monies we've already received from the state to cover the cost, and that's already in hand as we speak. So,
How much is it?
total cost is going to be, well, what you received, Larry, was $17,160. Through some corrections we've asked Siemens to make, it's going to be $14,651. So it's gone down with some corrections we've asked them to do.
That's changing up the system, is maintenance, any additional contracts on that? Just for interest.
Off the top of my head, I don't know about the maintenance. There's a warranty on it for the first year. I've been working with Brian Ward and the sheriff because we want it to coincide with their system as well. So, but everything, we already have a server, and it is replacing wires in the camera. So,
I just want to make sure this isn't another vanity project for Frank Rocha, so we can make sure that his hair and makeup are just right.
well, he made mention that he wants to be able to go around the office looking his best. So,
In HD.
in HD. So, we'll send you pictures.
I would appreciate it. And tell Frank thanks a lot.
I'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Moving on to item number 9, call on our good friend Monica Gold to bring us up to date on the library consensus building project.
Good morning, Commissioners. How are you? I'm going to give you a little packet here. Yep, there you go. All right. So, good morning. Purpose of our meeting here today with you is just to give you an update on where we are on the project, on the consensus folding project for the library system. So, as you know, we have completed 2 of the panel discussions already. We have a 3rd panel discussion that's coming up actually next week. And we have some details behind to describe that, and I'll go through that with you in just a moment. We have added an additional step in the process that we think is going to be very helpful. We are already working and have been working with the executive directors of the libraries to come up with a vision statement and a vision of the future. And we're actually including Larry in those meetings coming up over the next couple of months. And that is to ensure that we're looking at things correctly and that we're moving in a proper direction from a library standpoint. Then we're asking that the library directors and Larry present that vision to you in another conversation or discussion. At the same time, we will be sharing with you some feedback in terms of what we're looking at, in terms of how we look at a vision for the future.
Let me ask you this. You're selecting the executive directors at the library.
Yes.
And the chief clerk.
And Janelle.
Right. What about the president of those library boards, where they have a library board? what sort of voice does the library board?
Okay.
As-
So our vision was.
I mean, I'm not talking about the library board.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm talking
Each
about
library.
each library has an organization, correct?
Each of the library directors will then be reporting back to their board to make sure that they're getting that feedback. So we're scheduling actually 2 meetings. And we will be providing the library directors with questions and thoughts to be going back to the board to talk about what their vision is, and they're going to be coming back collectively, sharing that thought process. So it will be an iterative process. It's not going to be just one meeting. There'll be several conversations over the course of the next couple of months. So our desire is for us to get to a point where at least the library system itself can present to you what their thoughts are of the future and what that vision looks like, how expansive that vision is, what the key parameters are, what the key pillars of the vision are, so that when we're starting our consensus building, before we start our consensus building, you have an idea as to where the library system itself envisions the future. And we don't think we're equipped to do that until we've had all panel discussions.
And I just want to ensure that there are enough people around the table.
You're absolutely
And that
right.
the right sort of people are invited to the table. Or even those who may be perceived as not the right people, but they still need to see the table.
That's a good idea.
So that
It's
is
not
just.
unthinkable.
No, it's not
No,
unthinkable.
and
I think that's a good idea.
I don't mean to throw this,
No, it's
sort of
great.
wrench in here, but again, I want to ensure that we have the right people at the table,
Absolutely.
so.
Okay, so we will definitely put that out there and have that as a part of our conversation piece with the
Yeah,
board
and
members.
and I think another element here too is because these are community assets, that we should bring our local municipal officials into this process at some point.
Yes. So perhaps, what are your thoughts about including them in the conversation when the library board or the library system actually presents the vision? Is have that presentation not just to you as the commissioners, but also some of the municipal officials?
I think it's vital because these libraries, essentially the libraries got started within our communities.
Great. All right, so we'll add that as a part of the steps. And then our thoughts were, after we have done that, is give you as the commissioners the opportunity to really mull over everything that was shared with you and have sort of a one-on-one meeting in terms of with myself and you, in terms of where you think the next steps should be and what you're trying to get out of it. From a visioning standpoint, what you personally each believe is the vision, and then see if we can build some common ground. So when we have our first consensus building sessions, we have a good idea as to what we want to talk about. So we just don't want it to be a free-for-all. We want to make sure that we're having, formulated conversations around what we agree upon, and also facilitated formulated conversations about what we don't agree upon. So, but they'll be more structured, is the point. And you'll be intimately involved with what that structure looks like after we have that panel discussion with the
Monica, I actually was going to send you an email, Janelle an email on this, but I think as we, move into our next panel discussion on finance here next week, one of the things I think that would be helpful is if we had a historical look at how our libraries have been funded here in Cumberland County.
Yeah.
Now, at the last panel discussion, we weren't talking about finances.
Right.
A gentlelady brought into the mix, the issue of that the state of Pennsylvania actually provides more funding than the local municipalities or the local governments do. And of course, that conflicts with the picture where, I can show you the pie chart where essentially 3 out of every 4 government dollars comes from the county property tax for our libraries. And we only get, a smidgen from the state, about a quarter of the state. So what I'm interested in, as we examine this, that we look at all the facts.
Yep.
I'd like to know how things existed prior to the voters approving the library tax budget back in 1986.
Okay.
And, what level of funding was being provided from the communities at that time. And perhaps the issue, has to do with once the county library tax was created, everybody thought, okay, well, that's good enough, then we don't have to do any more. So.
Do you like a historical view of what that might look like?
Yeah, because I think, you know, on one hand, it looks like, oh, okay, we're not doing enough at the local county level, or whatever. And yet I said, on the other hand, you know, $3 out of $4 is coming from the county property tax in terms of public support government funding.
So let me share with you a little bit about the next panel discussion, if I may. I have included at the back of your packet just a high-level look at what we're going to be doing at that discussion. And as you'll notice, you'll see what the purpose of the session is, and it's very much in line, and it's the first page of this, very much in line with what you're talking about is. I think before we can actually start the panel conversation and ask questions of panelists, we need to have a full understanding of where we are today and how we got here. So Janelle will be sharing about 15 minutes on the finances and exactly how we got here, what the plan is, you know, for the current year and the next year. She will also be showing you where all the sources of funding comes from and how that has changed over time and how we in Cumberland County compare both state and nationally. So she's finalizing those charts actually today and tomorrow, and I will be sending those reports to you prior to the panel discussion so you can kind of, you know, go over, look at the numbers, and be prepared to ask questions. And if you have questions beforehand, we certainly would be happy to answer those.
Well,
but we think that that's going to be important.
Yeah, according to this, Monica, we're only looking back 10 years. I think, you know, I'm interested in you know, how our libraries got started and essentially how they were funded previously. You know, if we're going to talk about finance, I think we need to look at the whole picture, not just part of the picture.
I'd like to ensure that we're looking at counties that have a tax and also counties that don't have a tax.
Okay.
Whether that's nationally, within the Commonwealth, because the tax to me is very important.
Yeah, it is.
So,
right.
I'd like
It's
to-
the fundamental, that's the
To
fundamental
see
issue, right?
counties who have a tax
Okay.
and counties who don't.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. And the great thing that we have with respect to our panel is if you notice that we will have, and the second page just kind of gives you the agenda. And under the agenda, under the fourth component of the agenda is the opening remarks. And that's where Larry will come and kind of help set the stage for the discussion to ensure that we're on track, as well as where Janelle will be providing her report, her financial report, so everyone can kind of see where we're coming from. And I'll ensure that the report incorporates, at least at a high level, some of the components that you're looking for. We'll be providing you with the full PowerPoint. This is just kind of a snippet of it. That night as well, because we may have some adjustments and changes, but we definitely will be making sure you get the full financial report at least by Monday next week.
Who's the Franklin Group?
Oh, they are a capital fundraising team, so.
Locally?
Yes, yes. So Tom Stone is actually was very, very responsible for Bosler's capital campaign, so he's very familiar with how libraries are funded in this community. So he has a capital perspective. We have Deborah Fulham-Winston, who is a grant writer. She's been grant writing for 30 years. She actually works for TFEC right now. And she is responsible for a lot of the operating expense looks. What kind of grants are available? How do you get grants? What's the cycle of grants? Giving us a good understanding, because one of the things that we've looked at and we've talked about, and we did some surveys of our municipalities and also our school systems, and one of the number one things people were saying is get more grant money. So what we need to understand is what does that look like? How easy is it to get grant money? How is grant money funded? And she's going to help us to understand that in terms of as an option, as an alternative. And then we have Karen Cullings, who works for the Dauphin County Library System, sort of as Janelle's counterpart. She has a good perspective on what other communities in our area look like in terms of how they're funded and how things work. And I think our star panelist really is Glenn Miller, because he has a really good sense of what's happening in the state of Pennsylvania. So he knows what's happening with the funding from a state standpoint and how it's decreased. We're not the only ones that have received decreases from the state. Every county in Pennsylvania has received a decrease in state funding. But what does that look like? How do we get funded versus some of the other counties? What does that look like from a national standpoint? How does Pennsylvania compare as a state funder to to libraries versus some of the other states in the nation. So he has a very good perspective on that. He has just spent the last 18 months analyzing the finances of how libraries are funded. And he's not yet published the report, but he's going to be sharing his findings of the report, the ones that he can share at this point with us. So I think it'll be very helpful. I think he's going to give us a really good picture of how libraries are funded in the state of Pennsylvania, and then how does our model, the way we fund our libraries, compare to other communities, which I think is paramount. We really have to understand the big picture and what's available. So he'll be providing that insight. And then what I also have included for you is the questions for the panelists, so that you have a good sense of what we're going to be asking them. And Glenn, as well as Janelle, have already created some of the content behind some of these answers. And the PowerPoint that I send along to you will incorporate all of that information. So you'll have what's going to be presented. You're not going to have, of course, their verbatim comments, but you'll have at least some of the graphics and some of the data in front of you, so that you can really, look at it, discern it ahead of time, and be able to ask good questions. And then the last page on here's directions. Because I don't know about you, but I'm directionally challenged. So sometimes I kind of need a little bit of help. But it's very simple to get there. It's at Messiah's campus, and it's pretty much right off the main entrance. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. And in addition to the historical viewpoint, beyond the 10 years, as well as looking at the concept of counties with and without tax, is there anything else that you want to make sure that we've covered next week in preparation for your attendance? Or that we've given you as in terms of tools?
Yeah, I'm sure that if Glenn's going to be providing this information, they do around the state, but I'm also kind of curious as to how many had a voter-initiated special designated tax for public libraries in Pennsylvania.
I think all the ones that have a tax had to have it go through the.
Well, we should have an understanding as to how many, out of the
Well, I think,
counties,
for example,
how many
I
have.
heard correctly from York County. I mean, York County, what they've done, they didn't have, nothing was voter initiated, but that they've designated a certain portion of their county, or their millage, certain portion of their millage. They've taken the action to designate a certain portion of the millage to support libraries. So it wasn't like a voter-approved initiative. It was set amount at a set rate. Okay. And
But Allegan just recently.
So I'll reach out to Glenn and see what data he has or doesn't have. I'm not 100% sure, because I was not involved in that study, but if we have it, if he has it, I'm sure he'd be happy to share it.
Anybody.
If anyone has it.
It's Mr. Miller.
Yeah, he's a great guy, very knowledgeable, really understands the system, so I think he'll bring us a lot of great insight. And so.
One of the basic premises of one of the questions is our current model, is it viable? Is it viable now? Can it sustain us going forward? And in relation to other stuff. But this is, I think Commissioner Hertzler raised a good point. There was that period prior to the library tax. And that was the period since it. Right? So I think the historical thing is very important. Historical also what's about to come over the next 10 years as well.
Good. So I'll reach out to Glenn today and make sure that we're looking at those components. So any questions about next week?
Just a couple of things I've jotted down here. Some of that historical information, I would suggest to check with Janelle first. I sense that we're starting to load you up with a lot of things that I think, frankly, maybe beyond the scope of what was contractually agreed to. So, which on the business side, I hope you are tracking hours. I know you're donating a substantial amount of your hours, but I would like to see the full accounting so we get a sense of just how big this initiative is, because this is quite an undertaking.
Hundreds of hours.
Also on you were mentioned earlier about having Larry participate with the group to put together vision statement. So I'm assuming from what our discussion's been, that's going to be a fairly detailed vision statement based on.
So it'll be a vision statement, that will be some of the key pillars and components that we want to make sure are covered. And
Okay.
we're going to focus on priorities, because I think, you know, as we talked about the last time, there are a lot of things we could do. So as we had the 3-panel discussions, the first one was very broad. Here are all the great things we could do. Here's what some other library systems are doing, and it was extremely broad to the standpoint that does that work in our community? And is that really what we want? And last,
I just want to say, I'm a graduate of the Kirk Stoner School of Vision Statements, which means make it brief and make it relevant.
Well, that's actually why I raised that, because I've been involved in a lot of these things as well. And Kirk and I have a little bit of a disagreement on how best that rolls out. And what I'm getting at is not.
okay, sorry.
Not going to make Kirk.
You didn't know that you were going to be on the chopping block, did you?
It's not about bridges.
Yeah, but too bad the camera's not pointing in that direction. So, but anyhow, my point is we are going to need some specificity. I think that
I agree with you. So my process is,
okay.
a vision statement gives you sort of an overview. It's not just about coming up with a vision statement. We've got to prioritize what the key areas that the libraries, the folks that are actually in there working with people day to day in the library systems across our county, what they're seeing as the greatest needs. So we've heard what the needs are from the United Way, and we've seen the statistics of poverty. We have an understanding as to the diversity of the need in our community. What we don't have a good picture of is what is each community really doing, and how is it really helping that community need, and what are some of those critical services? Because what is needed in Shippensburg is different than what's needed in Carlisle. It's different than what might be needed in Camp Hill. So we really need to capture that, and that's really the point of these conversations is we do have to make choices. We can't fund everything that everybody wants to do. And if we were to prioritize, and if the librarians were to say collectively, as a group, we want to make sure that whatever monies we receive really, are focused on these critical areas, whether it be early childhood or, an elderly program or community group kinds of things, whatever they come up with, that will be shared. So we'll have a statement that'll be short and sweet and relevant, but we will also have criterion by which they're looking at. It's going to be a little bit more robust than just a vision statement. So that's the goal. And then for the same token, after we have shared that with you, we would like for you to go through a similar exercise at our first consensus building meeting. But before we do that, I'll be sharing with you some tools and some techniques, some things that I'd like for you to think through, and then really having kind of one-on-one meetings with you to get a sense of what it is you envision for the future. You've heard what the librarians have said, heard what the panelists have said, so what are you thinking? And do we see similarities? Is there common ground between what everyone has shared with what your visions are? And that's where we'll start the conversation. And then where are we disconnected? So we can make some wise choices about where we think the future of our system should go collectively. So it's going to be a process. You're going to have a very similar process. It's going to be a little different in that anytime we all meet together, we got to bring all these folks around. So excuse me, we'll have a little bit of an opportunity for you to really think through. So that you're not put on the spot. The last thing we want to do is come into a consensus building session and say, so what do you think? And you haven't even had time to digest all of the information that's there. So I'll be working with you individually and also collectively to help to get you each to that point. So when we actually do meet together as a team, we can really talk about it in the same kind of format.
Okay, well.
Or same kind of discussion points.
Well, the first two sessions, as Larry were useful, I think you mentioned as well, but this third session is really going to set the stage for
where the rubber meets the road.
This is the most important part, because you use the word choices, whether it's decisions, choices, that is what this entire process is about. So we need to have all the preparation in front of that happen. So this session is going to be the basis for those decisions. Those decisions are on our part, or also on the library board's part. The choices made, maybe some of ours, and some of theirs. So our goal should be to achieve some sense of sustainability of the system.
Yes.
So not to just answer one or two short-term questions. So there's plenty to do in this process, both for us and for the library system. That's why I certainly hope that the vision statement is going to demonstrate the choices on their part, acknowledgement on their part that there are limited resources. And then hopefully we get participation here that acknowledges that the county has made a commitment to the library system and has some type of obligation unless it formally decides to step away from that obligation. So there's plenty of need for vision and leadership both on their part and our part. So this process will keep that moving forward.
I think, if nothing else, it's going to focus as a system as to where our priorities are. Whether or not we, at the end of the day, can agree on all parts is we're going to, I believe, come out of this is what are our priorities as a community to funding the libraries? What is the role of the libraries in our community, and what do we think they should be focused on? Because, again, each library is separate, as you acknowledge. Each library has their own needs in the community. Not to say that they don't stop serving some of those needs, but as a system, what are our key priorities? And if, as a community, they feel as though, for example, if they want to fund a special program in this way or another, then perhaps they get private funding to do some of those things. So those are going to be some of the conversations we're going to have. We're not diminishing programs that they may be funding that are applicable to their community, but we have to kind of figure out a vision for the county that makes sense in terms of what those priorities are, and then each community will have to make their own choices in terms of how they spend their own collected dollars, as well as how they might utilize some of the dollars that are given to them, providing that they fund the core elements that the county is looking for. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. We're not trying to take over each community library and say, we can't do this program anymore. I mean, that's not our goal.
As intriguing as that idea might be. But that's not the one.
Right. Well, that's a whole nother project.
I think at the last session we had down there in Shuttleworth, right?
Yes.
I asked each one of the panelists to define community, and I've heard you use the word now about 3 dozen times. So the question is this a community from the county level on down, or is this a community from the grassroots up? And I'm interested in, and that's why I say, I think this conversation also has to include those local officials, especially those, with the libraries in their hometowns.
Right.
Because, I know, for example, with the East Pennsboro branch, it was started with all volunteers. Okay. In fact, a lot of the programming that goes on in East Pennsboro is still based on the volunteer efforts that occurred there. So, I think we would be missing something if we pretend that we're going to have some grand idea from on top. We need to include those folks in the conversation.
Okay. We'll definitely include them in the conversation here. We did do a poll of all the municipalities to kind of get a sense and a feel, which we'll share some of that data with you. It wasn't terribly enlightening, other than the fact that 70% of the officials said, and most of them were officials, said that communities should fund libraries, and in fact we do have a lot of local municipalities, which you'll see from the data that Janelle will be sharing with you, that we do have local municipalities funding library systems. They're not equal. Some fund a lot more than others, and some communities don't fund at all. And so, there is sort of a sentiment that the local community should fund something for the most part, but how they fund it and how they go about funding it is very diverse. So we haven't really gotten to a good, consensus in terms of how it is done. I think part of what we need to figure out is how should it be done, and to what degree.
It's actually, the whole thing's been, without being pretentious, it's been pretty well orchestrated. Any adventure has to reconcile wishes with resources. So we've had wishes, we've had future needs. now we're gonna have to reconcile it. So I think this has been building up nice, and I think what's been good about this session is that we've got some input from the commissioners on specific things. We'll know who to include and how to view the knowledge, the information, so that when it comes time to make choices, those are informed choices.
One other point.
Yes, sir.
When you speak to Janelle about
Yes.
compiling that information on municipal participation, make sure that non-cash contributions are in there. When I was on Borough Council, we always waived the library's sewer charges and also gave them a cash contribution. But in the 1 year when there was a pay raise, $500 pay raise for the Borough Council members, everybody agreed to donate that. Separate from the borough, individually all donated that as elected officials who donated our raises to the library. So not everything was just in the line item on the expense.
No,
Yeah, and we
Gary
did-
raised a good point, because I know, as far as I recall, the East Bensborough branch, donates the facility within the township's community building.
Right.
And I believe all utilities and everything there's no cost whatsoever.
Right. It's like Camp Hill, they do all the snow removal, and that's non-cash. They also donate all of the internet usage, so I mean, that's all part of the.
And as we saw down in Shippensburg, they parked a fire truck in the parking lot to make sure that the building didn't burn down.
Yeah, so that's a good point, we have to
But
make sure that.
but again, I think it's important when we look at, essentially where we come from. And I'm actually interested, again, I want to go back to the pre-1986.
Okay.
How do we do this?
So we will, we'll make sure you have that data, and we'll get everything to you, prior to the panel discussion, so that you have some time to go through it, mull it over, analyze the data, so that you're not looking at it for the first time at the meeting, because it is pretty intense. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of graphics, and some of it needs explanation. Some of it's pretty self-explanatory, because I think Janelle's done a good job of making it graphical. But we'll have those finals this week, and certainly get them to you Monday, so that you have them. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Well, if we don't have enough big stuff brewing, as everybody knows, this is two things. First of all, this is Cumberland County's York County week. We got the York County Economic Development and Planning people in yesterday. And here we have from York County again, our good friend Rich Warren. As everybody knows, the Board of Commissioners has endorsed a consolidation of our shared ride services and with rapid transit. We addressed initially the personnel issues, but then as we spoke to both our solicitor and all the stakeholders, particularly the funding organizations and human services, there were a myriad of details that needed to be addressed. And since the last time you saw Rich here, there have been a series of meetings going on between the Rapid folks and the folks in the county that are impacted either as providers or supporters of our shared ride services. And I think it's been a good process, and Rich is here to sort of give us an update on where things are, talk about next steps.
Okay, great. Good morning. As Larry said, we've had some really good meetings. If you recall, from the beginning, we provided you with that sort of checklist, multi-page with timelines and activities. And I'm pleased to report that we are holding tight to those deadlines. Things are going as planned, which is always sometimes surprising. So we're excited about that. We've had, besides the very productive meetings we've had here with many of the people that are in the room, we've had many multiple meetings between the transportation staff advancing things like standardization of policies and procedures, and we're working with the software vendor and how we're going to merge the two databases, and there's an activity inside the software. It's called points of interest, and so they're the common locations where we take people regularly, and they all have to be coded exactly the same. So we're looking at the list and looking at the latitude and longitudes and renaming those conventions. We may use Dr., DR, and folks here may call it Doctor, spell it. So they all have to be the same. So we're working through all those nuances. Things are moving along very well. At this point, I have nothing that causes any concerns on the operations or of either the software or the actual service. I think things are progressing nicely. We have begun talking about what the service may look like. We've talked about the sharing of resources across near county borders and what that looks like. Began to discuss what Saturday service would look like, really beginning sort of kicking off with the dialysis needs for Saturday, which we currently don't provide. So I think that's going to be a win pretty quick. So probably if there's any good news, bad news. The good news is that, we've targeted 5 positions. The bad news is we've achieved 5 positions 2 months too soon. So that's really good, but now both sides are struggling with staffing shortages. We'll get through it. But so the good news is we've achieved that to attrition as we thought we would. So that's a good thing. It's actually, I just calculated, 68 days. We can make it 68 days. We'll figure out a way to do that. So speaking of 68 days, we have in our original agreement that 30-day out clause. I think today is sort of the day of point of kind of no return kind of stuff. We need to issue today a purchase order to order the technology equipment so it can arrive and be installed by July 1st. It's in excess of $100,000. It's being funded completely by PennDOT. We have the grant. It's in place. They've awarded it to us. I'm holding the purchase order to issue that, but I really need a nod from the commissioners that, we would need to move forward with this because once we issue that purchase order and we have those expenses and we can't return the equipment, those funds would have to be paid back to PennDOT if we're not going to use the equipment. That's the only, I think, little bump in the road at this point. I don't know if I saw that on the horizon when we talked about that timeline, but it's a reality. So that's one thing we need to kind of work through. We had a lot of discussion on the 13th, some discussion about the governance and how that's going to look. And I know that Perry County still, at least the director of the transportation department and a couple of the county commissioners that I've talked to has indicated some interest. And I'd like, for us to continue to evaluate whatever that looks like through the support of the 3 of you. I don't know what that looks like, but I think we need to talk about how we can advance that. And, at some point we would most likely need to create a new municipal authority. It's not rocket science, it's just time-consuming process where each municipal body has to sort of agree to join, and it's a process. To do that and then do it again on the heels of Perry County would be a lot of work for nothing, really. And so I'd like to see, is there a relation that's going to form? How quickly? Set a date, move towards that date. Or if it doesn't look like it's going to, then let's go the other direction where it's just Cumberland County and move on. So there's some things we need to talk about. They're probably the 2 big items that are sort of the big question marks as we move forward. But operationally, 0 concerns. The staff has, anytime there's different cultures and you have to get people blended together, there's always, personality conflicts. That's sort of all behind us. The team really is formed and they're moving forward, working well together. That's kind of exciting, very exciting. So that's really the update that I have. I don't know if you have any questions.
Do we need a motion on that purchase order, or can I just simply say I support this?
This is a grant application that your authorities making to PennDOT.
It's been awarded to the New York Adams Transportation Authority to cover the cost of the merger.
Okay, cost of the merger. Well, I guess you're committing to something by doing that, so I guess you do that by motion.
But you indicated that there was a PennDOT cost and this would not fall out.
Well, only if we would choose to not continue to move forward, then those funds would have to be reimbursed back to PennDOT if the equipment could be returned or, if there were any costs that didn't go into the actual service.
The only caveat I would have is that, we don't have all of the information relative to some of the details. But I think, from my perspective, and that's why I don't know whether or not one of the motions necessarily. From my perspective, I believe I'm certainly interested in moving forward.
And I guess we probably need to see what that looks like. You legally appointed us as the coordinator of transportation services. So from PennDOT's perspective and from any transportation law, we
You
look
can
at
use
it.
without this.
Exactly. We can begin proceeding with whatever that service looks like July 1st. I mean, there's no issues with that. We have issues, there's some things we got to work through. We talked about that, the facility and the agreements, and we're working through that process. But again, nothing I see is earth-shattering. I think we've come to.
And I'm going to ask Keith to elaborate on this, but there's sort of 3 phases we're going through to get to the end. First phase is the current phase. We're operating under a memorandum of understanding that moves us towards consolidation. For an effective date of operational turnover to Rabbit on July 1st. As Keith has pointed out during this process, the formal fusion, okay, which is complicated, involves publicizing, changing bylaws, things have to be posted in York County, things have to be posted here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That takes a long time, it's complicated, with the possibility of Perry coming on board, okay? We only want to do that once, if possible. So phase 2 would be the phase from July 1st to December 31st, 2015, where in essence, okay, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, while all the other stuff for the formal incorporation into whatever the official name is we're using, YATA, doing businesses, whatever, we would need some kind of an interim agreement that would essentially be somewhat similar to what you have with Cumberland.
We could. We don't actually have anything with Northland.
But they're not part of the authority either.
They are not. They appointed us as the shared ride coordinator,
Right.
and we're providing the
All right,
service.
so maybe more like what you had with Adams County
Originally.
before they were
Before
formally
they-
part of it.
You had a management agreement, Mr. Farr, I think, with Adams for
Correct.
about a 10-year period, and then they transitioned into, I say, membership of the authority, participation.
They merged into, they joined the authority.
And Mr. Thomas raises a question I've had, and that is the documentation from a county standpoint as of July 1. I know Northumberland has nothing, but since we're talking about using facilities, the last document I received, I assume from the Authorities Council, was one that was shared with everyone that dealt primarily with the lease and some of the employees. And would that be the basis of the agreement going forward from July 1?
I think they are separate from if the board chooses to go a management agreement route, I think those two are separate from that. They are facility, they're something that we would continue to have even after the authority has been formed.
Okay.
So I think they're separate, and I think we should write them in such a way that, you know, the terminology escapes me, but they supersede into the new organization should one be formed, so we don't have to redo those. I think they stand alone.
Okay, so then I guess at some point we should have a proposed management agreement from the Authorities Council.
Okay, we can do that.
Before July 1?
Yes.
Because that would be in addition to the lease. But, and I don't want to get off on a different path, but a fundamental decision that I think you need to make, and probably sooner than later, and that would be your participation with seats in this authority that may come about as a result of what's happening up to the end of December. Because if your authority doesn't want the county to have seats at the table, then and that may be a fundamental issue for you, that needs to be, I think, addressed and fleshed out relatively quickly.
They do. The reality is that our authority doesn't get to make that call. Your county commissioners in Adams County gets to make those calls.
You make the proposal to the
That's correct.
commissioners.
We have
They
to make
approve
the
it.
initial.
Right.
Yeah, we've already passed a resolution to have the board, to have Cumberland County join us should they choose to. So the formal action's in place. I want to go back to the management agreement. The difference between Adams and York in that history was Adams County Transit Authority contracted with York County Transportation Authority for service. We don't have that same entity. I think what we could do, and we'll explore this through council, because you're appointing us as the shared right coordinator, what we just need to do is have some conditions set up of what does that mean. I don't think there's a management agreement, because you've given us the management authority by calling us the shared right coordinator, really defining what that looks like versus a management agreement.
And that's fine. I'm sort of lost in the weeds. I've done amendments to authority bylaws and things like that, but this type of arrangement at this scale is something I'm going to have to rely on the authority solicitor and obviously my review. So
I would suggest that part of that, defining the shared right coordinator, that the county would appoint 2 advisory board members. We can't have board members on the authority if you're not a member of the authority. But we certainly could identify individuals who are advisory members that will participate in the board meetings, get board packets, so there's that information flow, which is really critical. So I think that's very important.
So,
I didn't mean to.
no, I think the great thing about this is we're trying to move at warp speed in the public sector. I think this is, I'm pulling my ears right off. And I think there's substantial goodwill and mutual trust on both sides. Clearly, we cannot continue to operate under a memorandum of understanding that's set to expire on July 1st. But I hear there's a consensus that, let's say, no later than the end of May, through consultation, we will come back with an agreement of appropriate nature to cover things between July 1st and December 31st. In the meantime, all the processes of formal incorporation plus the resolution of the Perry County issues will be dealt with in the second half of 2015, full disclosure, et cetera, et cetera. We've heard now that, in fact, you're waiting for the folks from Cumberland County to come on board when that time happens. I think we also have this immediate issue here of you all want to move forward so that this can happen. You need this big chunk of software. And I don't know if I heard whether we needed a motion. I think we did need a motion to make that motion.
And I was going to say, I think the issue of the governance then can be sort of addressed and worked out, accordingly.
Yeah, I don't see anything that's insurmountable.
I will submit that the Board of Commissioners support the grant opportunity for $100,000 for software to maintain the system. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Any additional comments?
Yeah, I would just say that I'm certainly fully supportive of that. On the question of the governance structure and all that, one of the things that we could consider is essentially addressing whatever our concerns are relative to the initial operation and a contractual relationship. If we're going to move in the direction of possibly Perry County coming in, or maybe even Franklin County coming in, okay, with respect to who's going to serve on what board, is something I think I heard our chief clerk say that we're going to do that once, right? That's what you're talking about. So, I mean, in a contract, if it's accurately spelled out, what essentially the services that are to be provided, how they're to be provided, if there's any something that doesn't work out correctly, then essentially that would allow us to get out of the contract or to take whatever action would be necessary. So, but on this motion, I think
the motion's on the grant.
No, I fully support moving forward.
Any other? Are there any other comments? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner reports. A couple things. Out of Children and Youth, the spring dinner was held to recognize the Foster Parent Association and Years of Service Awards to some of the staff. Senator Vance presented a citation to Wendy for her years of service, and I presented the county's citation also to recognize all the years of service that our Director of Children and Youth has given. Conservation District held their tree sale. They sold around 1,000 seedlings, had 250 customers for the 38th annual sale. They have also assisted the Chesapeake Bay Foundation in purchasing about 2,400 seedlings and about 2,000 tree shelters for landowners in the South Central region. Commission for Women, I have a nomination that I will be making for Monday for appointment to that commission. Everyone has received her resume. Drug and alcohol also met. Again, the concerns over the overdose on painkillers continues, which is outpacing most other substances. The Drug and Alcohol Commission identified the inpatient providers that they intend to contract with during the next fiscal year and have begun the process to prepare those contracts. What was also mentioned and to be acknowledged is the positive outlook here for naloxone to be provided by the state police and other agencies to administer this life-saving drug for overdose. TMI, there was a press release that most saw regarding the announcing of the successful evaluation. I'd like to acknowledge, of course, the staff and the employees and volunteers and all the nonprofits that truly work to make this exercise and this evaluation process a success. On 911 legislation, House Bill 911 endured a lengthy session this week. I would like to thank those legislators who supported 911 and certainly opposed the problematic amendments that were presented. The final vote on this is due May the 4th to be sent to the Senate after lengthy debate and discussion. That's all I have. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Commissioner Cross. Commissioner Hensler.
Okay, well, after about 2 years of effort, without a permanent place to call home, a week ago, this past Monday, I joined our senior citizens in Shippensburg on their first day at Branch Creek Place, the newly refurbished community center on Fayette Street in Shippensburg, right next to the Borough Building, which is the new permanent home for the area's Senior Citizen Activity Center. It was great to see this community effort finally come to fruition, where everybody across municipal, county, and party lines pulled together to find a new location for our county's busiest Senior Citizen Activity Center and to secure the funding necessary, including the $112,000 state lottery funded grant to refurbish the building, a former grocery store that was in pretty bad shape, and bring it into good repair, the new HVAC system, new plumbing, new kitchen, and other major improvements. Messiah Lifeways, the new sponsor of the Shippensburg Center, donated many of the furnishings, and there were other very generous contributions from community donors as well. As my colleagues know, in addition to helping the center secure the state grant, we also chipped in some additional funding from the Aging Block Grant that our county receives. And the center is planning a grand opening 2 weeks from now on May 7 at 12:30 p.m. Following our next workshop meeting. And I just want to extend to both of my colleagues, an invitation to attend. The seniors in the Shippensburg area, a very patient group of terrific folks, are very grateful for our full backing and support to help make their new senior center home a reality.
You said the 7th.
Yeah, May 7 at 12:30.
I think that's pretty important, but I'll try.
Okay. I know it's following our workshop, but I attended, along with Commissioner Cross, the annual dinner and meeting of the Cumberland County Farm Bureau. Representative Bloom and other state legislators were in attendance, including Representative Mark Keller, Perry County, whose district now includes a significant portion of the western part of Cumberland County. I also joined Commissioner Cross a week ago Tuesday for the TMI exercise, a once every 2-year training event overseen by the Federal Emergency Management Agency to make sure our public safety department and our first responders are on their toes and prepared as possible should there be another incident like what occurred at TMI in 1979. And sitting around the command post there and talking to some of our folks, it dawned on me, and I'm going to age myself now, that there's a good number of people who weren't even born yet or were too young to remember, like I can, what it was like around here on March 28th, 36 years ago.
I was
And I do remember.
That's how old I am.
I do remember it was pretty unnerving. Nobody knew what was going on, and for the longest time there was an awful lot of confusion. In the end, I would say, and I think there are those who would share the sentiment that somebody was looking down from on high because we were all pretty darn lucky. In any event, as I understand, we passed FEMA's review of flying colors, and let's just hope that we never have to go through that scenario of what happened 36 years ago again. Last Wednesday, I had the privilege of welcoming our new governor, Tom Wolf, to Cumberland County, as I introduced him at the annual summit meeting of the 8-county South Central Assembly at the Radisson in East Pennsboro Township. Prior to the governor's arrival, I attended a very interesting panel discussion with Commissioner Cross on economic development that featured most of the economic development CEOs from throughout the region. And my takeaway is that we all share very similar needs. And one of the biggest ones, since we are at or near full employment in the region, is workforce development to match our post-secondary education and training programs with the skills that our employers need today to compete and succeed, and that those creators of good jobs with good pay need to help convince them to locate or expand here. Also, at that conference, and I know Ben Loudermilk from our Housing and Redevelopment Authority is checking it out, but there was an announcement made by our 2 county commissioner colleagues from Lancaster with respect to what's called the Local Housing Investment Fund and Trust of South Central Pennsylvania. And essentially what this trust is all about is trying to see what we can do about the need for affordable housing throughout the South Central Pennsylvania area. So Ben is looking into it to see how we might participate in that program as well.
I could, Jim, too. The presentation from the president of Central Penn College talked about how nimble they have been working with the business community to establish classes that are appropriate for what you mentioned, the need on workforce development. And that was an excellent presentation by her to tell and express how they're prepared to step up and work to ensure the workforce is responsible.
Of course, also last Wednesday, I joined my commissioner colleagues at the Keystone Building for Local Government Day, and I see he's now left now, but to celebrate our own Kirk Stoner for the statewide recognition that he received relative to being recognized for his expertise and hard work in the realm of planning for our future. Last Friday, I joined Pennsylvania's newly designated Secretary of Aging, Teresa Osborne, at a recognition luncheon sponsored by our Office of Aging to honor about 50 of our county citizens for their volunteer efforts in assisting our older adults in a range of areas. Our Aging Advisory Board met following that volunteer recognition luncheon and recommended 2 individuals to fill the remaining vacancies on our county's 15-member Aging Advisory Board, and I will be presenting those recommendations. They are on Monday. They are Betty McGarrow, Mechanicsburg, and Bonnie Fowler of Carlisle. To fill out the remaining vacancies, and I'll bring that up at Monday's meeting. The Cumberland County Housing and Redevelopment Authority met last Friday, and they approved their 5-year plan submittal to the Housing and Urban Development Authority. The auditor reviewed the audits for both authorities. No findings or concerns. Cash position is about the same as last year, which is good. Housing choice voucher is up 10 for the month. On the redevelopment side, both the Molly Pitcher and Shepherd's Crossing are on track for completion this year. On Sunday afternoon, I attended the community meeting that was held at the Fire Hall in Mount Holly Springs. The first of 3 meetings in conjunction with that borough's efforts to upgrade the streetscape and revitalize the borough. And I understand that our planning department was very actively involved in actually assisting the borough in its application for about a $25,000 grant to help with that effort. Also Sunday afternoon, I attended the retirement party in Newville for Raza Roshinsky, who was served for 25 years as the director of the Big Spring Senior Citizens Center. And in fact, on Monday, we will be recognizing not only Raza, but also 2 other folks who are retiring from the Senior Citizens Center here in Carlisle. So we've got some shoes to fill in those areas, but they're both very active centers, and we're going to recognize these folks for a job well done. And let's see, last but not least, on Monday night, I did attend the Capital Region Council of Governments meeting. The COG voted to approve refinements to their bylaws and to admit Elizabethtown from the northwestern portion of Lancaster County as the newest member of the Capital Region Council of Governments. That's about all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Urson. Commissioner Eichelberger.
Okay, number items here on the MHIDD side. This month's the meeting last week was held in Perry County, and I do know the commitments I was not able to travel up there, but Dawn Warner did provide a good overview and some background materials on some of the things. So I'll put a few of those out there. We did discuss earlier about the Mental Health Awareness Month with the proclamation at the beginning of the meeting. That, of course, is May 1st, so just a little reminder on that. Also, we have the Employment Initiative mini grants were discussed for 2015. Those, you may recall, I've spoken before about the idea of providing employment outcomes, more positive employment outcomes for IDD consumers post-educational years, so that there are great opportunities for participation in the community, as we spoke about earlier. At last month's meeting, we saw an agency-produced video on some of the, at least one young man locally who's been actively integrated into a nice employment situation with Giant as a result of that. The grants for this year are going to be targeting high school graduates for 15, 16, and 17. The first award has gone to Goodwill Keystone area. They're going to be working with up to 10 individuals, IDD consumer individuals, providing soft skills training and paid work experience at minimum wage. That's going to be taking place at the Goodwill stores here in Cumberland County, as well as the Giant grocery store here in Carlisle. There's enough interest in that program that Perry County is looking for means to duplicate that and implement that in their community as well. I need some more details on this, but I see we're reconvening the Aging IDD County team, and that in the past has been a discussion over the greater implications of the special needs community with greater age expectancy. Which what we're seeing is a lot of caregivers, generally parents, who are now well into very elderly years, who are still in a position of being a caretaker to special needs children, which is something that increasingly are visibly outgrowing. And we're seeing greater prevalence of the life expectancy of special needs children as well, with advances in healthcare. My sister 2002, and they told us that was 20 years longer than what would have been expected when she's originally born. So those things have impacts not only for the children themselves, but obviously for the family members and other caretakers who are faced with a shortage of options in terms of providing for the children, which of course creates substantial anxiety for the caretakers themselves. So hopefully we'll devote some additional attention to Office of Aging on opportunities there. The Mental Health Advisory Board reported on the Consolidated Community Reporting Initiative, and that is the training of the providers for that is underway. Simply a single entry point for the application for services and supports. They've had positive reports back on the first round of training. The MH program is in month 3. It's transitioned to alert pharmacy. I mentioned before a couple of hiccups along the way, very predictable types of things, but that seems to be evening out. So if you have any concerns about that, they are aware of that. The Medicaid expansion continues to move forward. That obviously provides some additional work for our folks. That's going to continue for a while. The MH provider meeting was held. And they discussed the budget for next year. There was a budget briefing also that we provided to the group, which didn't reveal anything new in terms of funding levels and availability. Everything was relatively flat. However, there was discussion that I want to bring to the Commissioner's attention about the possibility that if a state budget would not pass by July 1, we would be potentially revisiting the situation we had in 2011, 2010, where providers simply couldn't be paid. And the county essentially front-loaded that as dollars from general fund dollars and were reimbursed later on once the state funds were released. We're obviously in a very different position as a county, general fund-wise, than we were in 9/10. So I would say if we're going to initiate a discussion on that, we probably should start with some alerting of the budget office that situation needs monitoring, and we probably need some analysis on whether that request would be something that would even be feasible rather than waiting until the last minute for a request to develop.
I think Sylvia's scheduled to come in at some point very soon.
Okay.
Talk about the possibility of that.
Okay, good. The bulk of that meeting was because it was in Perry County, was devoted to an analysis of the healthcare access study by the Perry County Health Coalition, and there's statistical information and all that attached if anyone has any interest in that. Also, just wanted to pass along thanks to the Sentinel for a very nice article that they did, not you, Josh, but your predecessor did on the Pathways Academy, which also is a part of the employment enrichment program for the IDD community. Very nice to have that profile, make people aware of those opportunities. On the library side, we did have a board meeting this week. As you might guess, most of the topic matter discussed was in regards to the coalition, sort of consensus building exercise, and obviously very interesting discussion, a variety of opinions relayed there. The other substantive item was some reporting out on the library system's participation in meeting the new standards for reporting, and as well as the training in regards to complying with the new child protection laws. So the library system has obviously a lot of challenges there. There's a lot of volunteers who work the library system, and many of whom, most of whom have contact with young people, and therefore they are covered by the requirements. They've had considerable amount of discussion and analysis done in conjunction with, I believe, the solicitor for their association in developing these systems to determine the exactly eligibility and the different criteria of who needs that training. The training is very expensive and becomes quite a burden in the individual libraries in many cases. Anything additional on that you heard? Also on the Economic Development Corporation in their board meeting this week, and the couple of things, the Defense Preservation Group met last week. We had an excellent presentation regarding the enhancement of mission in local facilities, and particularly we heard a presentation from the Carlisle Barracks in regards to possible expansion of their role, and that the prospect of some serious capital improvements being made there over the long term, nothing imminent, but they've begun thinking about their long-term potential there. And one point that was raised was the possibility of expanding the footprint. It's no secret the county has land in that area, some of which is for sale. So I think we need to, I did ask the EDC folks to make sure that the commissioners and the county chief clerk are included in any furtherance of those discussions, so we have very early participation in that. Again, nothing imminent on that, so we don't need to see a headline tomorrow, Steve. But obviously some preparatory work and planning, some discussion needs to take place there. The county needs to be in the loop sooner rather than later in that process. So just to mention that so everybody's aware of it. We also received a briefing from the EDC folks regarding the new website that they have implemented, rolled out on the 14th. Still a couple of tweaks and refinements, but we got a demonstration of it, very impressive. A lot of good materials to help folks who are visitors find itineraries in the area along their interest lines, but just as important, a lot of site selection tools now for folks who may be potentially interested in locating business here, determining what the infrastructure is, what the general availability of economic assets here, to encourage them to get closer to Cumberland County as a place to locate or expand business. They also shared with us a number of the collateral materials that have come out, some of which we will have here in our office if anyone's interested. We did get the updated food, farm, and outdoor attractions guide. There is the regular sites and attractions guide that they put out. This is the first year that their annual report has been produced in-house, full production, full of all types of information about the county and programs and initiatives that are underway here that should help us build our tax base. And of course, the Sentinel insert. This is very widely distributed in the county. We're trying to get these out as widely as possible. We've gotten great feedback on this tabloid handout in terms of a good overall profile and many wonderful things about Cumberland County. So we obviously had an opportunity to look at those in detail and hear about the development of it. The only other thing I had from them was the tourism grants program is set to be rolled out for the 6th year. It's going to be rolled out next week. I'll leave it to Shereen to give you the specifics at that time, but they have about $100,000. This is the deadline will be July 31st. All the eligibility stuff, I'll let her cover with that. They did say they're trying to simplify the process. Still a lot of applicants. Last year, we want to obviously expand that, make other organizations participate. That is a fine example of a good public-private partnership. We've got some seed money in there from the EDC and then private organizations and municipalities can bring forward ideas on things that are visitor promotion oriented in their communities. And they have a rigorous program of selection that committee's been appointed that will be looking at those for the value they return, the return on investment on those projects. And that has been a very wonderfully accepted program and helps us engage our partners in the private sector very successfully. The only other item I would mention is tomorrow afternoon we have the first in a long time a strategic planning, I guess you'd call it a retreat, but it's not really a retreat. This is for the South Central Workforce Investment Board. We have a new director there, Kevin Perky, who's so far has really demonstrated some admirable qualities, very forward-looking, very extremely energetic. This will be the first opportunity that we have local elected officials committee has had to really weigh in on big picture issues. We heard earlier some discussion regarding workforce issues, I guess from the Assembly. The Assembly talks about it, but the WIB is where it actually happens. So they're going to be discussing a wide range of new initiatives as well, make better use of the public dollars, limited and shrinking public dollars again for workforce investment, and the need to emphasize workforce development as a key economic issue throughout South Central Pennsylvania. So that'll be about a 4-hour session tomorrow for participating. That's everything I have. I'm sorry, we have, do we want to do that here?
Yeah.
Okay. Recycling and Waste Authority met earlier this week, and they did bring us a candidate, Sharon Dodd, to fill the vacancy that's on there that we've been advertising for a while. So there's a recommendation letter that has been forwarded to everybody at this point. Sharon Dodd of Carlisle, Gapview Road, Gapview, and we will act on that Monday. Okay. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Derek, can I ask you a question? Was curious as that you mentioned about, there was this discussion with the library board relative to the costs associated with the training, the background checks for the volunteers and that. Did they give any kind of an estimate? You said it was very expensive. Is that something that you could, get that information? Because
I can let you know about that. I don't recall her mentioning any number. She just said about it, there's a substantial cost because of the number of folks that are covered.
I'm just wondering when we get into our finance discussion, next week, I mean, if we could get like an estimate of that. So I think going hand in hand with the other question is, the money that we're not getting from the state any longer, to support the statewide library card access and essentially allow folks from outside of the area to come into Cumberland County to use our library. So all of these things where, essentially the state puts requirements on. I think Karen mentioned that, we have new standards that we've got to meet. These are all state requirements. I think all those things ought to be assessed in terms of, the funding that we're either receiving or not receiving to pay for those things.
Okay. I'll send her an over.
Thanks.
And it's important to know too that some of the volunteers may in fact have already gone through a background check volunteering with another agency. So there can be some redundancy in individuals. So every agency is looking at this, both nonprofits and those within government.
Thank you, Commissioner Eichelberg. Moving on then to item 12, request an executive session regarding personnel issues. Is there any other business to be brought before the board?